All right, I am going to do the personal rules for reading tag. And if you know what's good for you, you will do this tag as well, as quickly as possible. This is a tag that is created by MJ at this Reading This Life. It's inspired by a video that Michael K. Vaughan made, the ever dapper Michael K. Vaughan, where it was his personal rules for reading. And MJ took this video where, he says at the beginning, there are no rules for reading other than read. But, he gave his those were his personal rules. MJ very cunningly, I don't know, there's a dark and nefarious thing going on here, created an open source tag for this, where she starts off with 4 prompts and then tagged a bunch of people and said, each person who does this tag, does the questions, but because it's a personal reading tag, they add 1 question, 1 prompt to it, kind of stemming out of their own personal reading. What are their general guidelines, as a pirate once said. So that means that this tag has grown, and it has grown alarmingly quickly. I now count 18 prompts in this tag. Now, MJ says in the instructions of her tag, once you get to a 10 prompt mark, you can make that part 1. So this is part 1 of the personal reading tag. So that said, let's do these questions. Yes, and as I said, the first 4 are MJ sort of riffing off of what Michael K. Vaughan said. I will put a link down below, of course, to Michael K. Vaughan's original video and to MJ's video. And God knows all the other people who've done this tag and added their prompts to it. So, prompt number 1. Do you strive to read every day? If yes, do you do anything different or special to make time within your day? If no, why not? No, I don't strive. I always read. The only time I can think in memory that I did not read was a day that I got horrible, an allergic poison kind of food reaction, and I was puking for 2 days straight. And it's hard to hold a book up while you are puking. Sorry if that's disgusting, but yeah. So I don't, and I basically just try and cram books in wherever I can get them. I read on my phone when I have a moment. I read in, not early in the morning. There's a lot of people who get up early in the morning. I would just fall back to sleep. But I do read a lot, always before bed. There's all the bits in between. So yeah, that's my answer to that. Number 2. Do you always stay within your favorite genres, or do you experiment with reading different genres and subgenres? I think reasonable. I'm a heavy, let's just go fiction, nonfiction. Much more heavy on the fiction, but I do read nonfiction. I'm reading actually a couple of nonfiction books at the moment. So there's that. And then within the genres, I do literary, but I also do science fiction, fantasy, the odd horror, the odd romance. A lot less mystery. Mystery just has to have good characters because I don't care about the mystery. And, the many multiple others. I guess I'm eclectic, probably, but with a heavy leaning towards lit fic and the fantasy, probably. Number 3, do you DNF, do not finish? If yes, what was the last book that you DNF'd and the reasons why? And if your answer is no, then what drives you to finish the book? I do DNF. I don't DNF a ton. Just probably because I definitely kind of screen out stuff. But I do DNF because I find, I'm a slow reader to begin with. And when I'm really not liking a book, I'll just get slower and slower. And a crappy book will take me twice or 3 times as long to read, or a book that, not crappy, but a book that I'm not getting along with will take me, twice or 3 times the thing. So I just, by necessity, I just need to do that. And yes, the last book that I DNF'd, I had to look up on Goodreads because I expunged it from my mind, was a nonfiction book. It's Everything and Less, the novel in the age of Amazon by Mark McGurl, which is a book all about kind of the economics, I guess, I don't know, of, how Amazon has affected the novel you know, in its era. It's now the dominant force of publishing. And so how has that changed the novel? I can't report much more than that. Unfortunately, Mark McGurl is writing in heavy English English professor jargon. It's just I just found it impenetrable. I went and looked at a review of it, and one of the reviews was, oh, this is a book that's actually more interesting to read the reviews of the book than it is to actually try and read the book itself. And that was my case in there. So that was a book I DNF'd. I don't think I even bother. I didn't even, sometimes I will do, if I take against a book so negatively that and it makes, for some reason it fires me up, I'll do a DNF review saying at the very beginning, I did not finish this book, and these are the reasons why. And sometimes that can lead to interesting conversations of people who did get through the book, and will either, you know, say, "Oh, you missed all this," or, "Oh, yeah, I kept on going, and oh my God, yeah." So maybe that was the right thing. So yes, that was my first, that's number 3. Number 4, do you like to read challenging books? If yes, what draws you to them? If not, why do you avoid them? Been a very interesting conversation amongst all the people who've done this tag of like what constitutes a challenging book. I think MJ kind of mentions just sort of classics in general, which I would probably respond to the fact that actually some of those classics are immensely readable and immensely entertaining. And that's why they've lasted so long. So that, you know, and combine that with DNFing, you may pick up a classic and go, oh, it's not for me, and toss it. Keep going through classics until you find one like, wow, this is fun. This is cool. Because there are, I mean, I guess take that with a grain of salt. I am a complete geek, and I like reading Trollope and crap like that. So I've got a certain viewpoint on stuff. But yeah, so there's that kind of idea of challenging. I think there's challenging of subject matter. I know there's some booktubers who are really into very confronting, dark books, and because I'm such a slow reader, some of those books I kind of hesitate reading, just because I know I'm going to be spending, like, I could spend easily a month with one of these books in that super dark place. And, you know, there's a lot of times I don't have the mental fortitude for that, or it's not what I'm going for a book. You know, there's books that are like, you know, books on philosophy and stuff like that, which are challenging, which some of those have defeated me. So, you know, I do like a challenge. I do like a book that kind of pushes back at me and makes me work. I find that books like that can be that much more rewarding. And I also like super easy, you know, bestsellers that are like, wow, there's just a story there and it's going to pick you up and it's going to carry you along. That's fun. But I also like books like, oh, I really have to think about that. And I'm still thinking about that later. Whereas some of the easy books, they just kind of pass right through you and you don't think of them again. So I like a mix. I like a mix of them. So I guess, yes, I do like to read whatever challenging books might mean. So yeah, that is the end of the questions that MJ came up with. And now we'll do the other 6, and then I will stop, and then I will do the next part of this tag in the next video. So the next one is Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads, who asked, do you read books that have been banned by local authorities? I don't think I go out of my way to read banned books. I find that just naturally a lot of the books that I've enjoyed happen to be banned books. That was an interesting question, because I was like, oh, have there been books banned in my area? I live in Victoria, BC, and I couldn't find any data specifically for Victoria, but kind of Canada-wide, it's like, yeah, Canada has, as much as like all other places, has a rich tradition of people on all sides of the political spectrum wanting to challenge or restrict the use of certain books. And I mean, I think that's something to keep in mind. I just voted early in my local civic elections, which was one of those things it's like, okay, yeah, there's certain groups that are coming up, right-wing groups in our country that, like, oh, they might ban books, and I do not want them in. There's other reasons why I wouldn't want them in power as well. But when you look at kind of the history of book banning, it's like, well, both right and left can happily ban books. I'm very much for the case of that, you know, people, including kids, should just sort of read what they read. I mean, that's the cool thing about books. You can often, parents are just so happy that you're reading, they don't actually question what you're reading, and you get to expose yourself to a whole bunch of different stuff. That I'm sure that's someone could come up with a quite horrific thing. I'm pretty much under the illusion that kids are actually fairly resilient that way, and that the stuff that they're going to encounter in the world, something nasty in a book is probably should be the least of your worries, whether it is actually nasty or not, or if that's just what your particular personal beliefs are. Okay. So that's my long-ass non-reply to question number 5 from Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads. So let's go on to number 6, Ollie at Criminolly. Do you read books by authors whose views you disagree with? There's this question and the next one. I think it's one of those ones you'd like to think you do, but I also think I also do a lot of self-editing of like, oh, I'm not interested in that, or I'm not interested in this, like, or this is a viewpoint. I question, I mean, everyone wants to think they have an open mind and they give everyone a fair hearing. I mean, there's some stuff that you just like, okay, that's actively hateful, and I'm not going to support you in your active hate. Now the thing is, I also read a lot of old books, and those old books have viewpoints that are definitely stuff that is not of our time, that are racist, sexist, homophobic. But they're books that I actually still they're still like, well, there can still be well-written books and have all that bad stuff in it. In some ways, old books kind of contain our culture, and they contain the history of our culture, and they can contain stuff that is still, you know, maybe circulating around, and I think that's valuable to still have. So I very much read that. I think I'm probably, when I get into the modern authors, that's probably more tough. It's like, I don't want to financially support people like that. I mean, it's one of those things. I'd like to think I was super open-minded. I don't know how open-minded I am. I don't know how open-minded other people are. And yeah. So it's a good question to ask yourself about your reading. Like, are you just simply reading inside your bubble? I have a suspicion that most people, including myself, are actually reading inside their bubble, no matter how much they want to protest that they're not. Number 7. At Steve Donahue, do you clear Steve Donahue? Yes, I got 2 from Steve here. Do you clear your mind of preconceptions and biases before you start a new book, or do you go in with axes to grind? So there's like axes, like, oh, I actively hate this author and I'm going in to trash them. No, if I hate this author, I'm not going to read. I probably am not going to read their book. If I hated their last book and I'm going to hate this one. Steve is a book reviewer, so he does not have that option. But I, as a pleasure reader, I can just pick the people that, like, oh, I like their last book, I'll try this one. I'm very open. Or, oh, it's a new author. Oh, this sounds interesting. Cool. Now, do I clear my mind of preconceptions and biases? It's like, no. I think I carried those preconceptions and biases, and hopefully that coming into contact with a book and clashing with a book will hopefully maybe illuminate them for me. I think sometimes when I take against a book, or I say, I'm having trouble with this book, I try and make an effort to say, is this the book or is this me? Like, which one of us has got the issues here? And that's a part of why I read, is to kind of illuminate, hopefully to try and illuminate what's my problems, what are my bias and my preconceptions. I think that's the whole thing of, I'm not going in as a blank slate. I find that's, for me as a reader, that would be dishonest, because I know I carry this stuff and I can't just go, I'm gonna just kind of take a fair hearing. It's like, no, I know I'm coming from a certain viewpoint, and I'm gonna have to, and that's the joy of hitting the older books where it's from 100 or 200 or 300 years ago. It's like, no, I'm bringing my modern sensibilities to it, and wow, what does that activate in me? What bias of mine, what preconceptions of mine does that do? And, you know, the biases and preconceptions that the author has poured into the book to make it such a rich book, because that's what it's recording, and it's that clash between us that makes the reading. Number 8, Steve's second question: do you recommend books? If you end up do you recommend books if you end up really liking them? And if so, what form does that recommendation take? I think I do not recommend, I have not recommended books for a long time. I think when I was young and thought I knew everything, I would recommend books. Oh God, I shudder to think of some of the things that in my limited reading I would recommend. Henry Miller comes to mind. But I think nowadays I don't recommend books as so much as I like here on BookTube. I talk about books and I try and outline why I liked a book or why I disliked a book, or what I thought was interesting in a book, or what I thought really didn't work in a book. And that's either just a discussion, or you can take that as a recommendation. If you feel like you jibe with what I'm saying, then I guess it's a recommendation. If you go, wow, that guy does, oh man, I like nothing of what he likes, then it's an anti-recommendation, and everything he hates you should be reading right now, maybe. So yeah, so that's where I'm at probably with that. Steve, who is a great recommender of books, and you should definitely check out his channel for that very purpose. You will pick up a ton of books to read. Number 9, at Bill Ruttenberg. What was the last book you recommended? Was there a specific reason for that book? Do people come to you regularly for book recommendations? No, nobody comes to me for book recommendations. Actually, if I'm married to you, I may have recommended books to you, and I have. And probably my big success with Ja, my partner, is that I recommended the Scott Sigler Galactic Football League series to her, and specifically an audiobook, because she's gone through a long period where she's just not physically able to read, and Scott Sigler's Galactic Football League is super funny, super action-packed, and Scott Sigler himself is a great performer of his books. This is the author giving you the voices in his head through his own voice, which is just so awesome, and would be a series that if you're into science fiction, if you're into sports, or you're into both, that would be my recommendation. Don't listen to me. Okay, and number 10, Bill Ruttenberg had one more. What book have you had the most success in recommending? I guess that would be the Galactic Football League, because I have a recommendation audience of one, and yeah, those books have gotten listened the heck out of by Ja. All right, I'm going to stop there, because this has probably gone on way too long already, and there is 18 prompts at this point. At this point of recording, there is another 18 prompts in this thing. MJ, what have you done? You are going to destroy the internet. All the videos on the internet are going to be personal rules of reading, the personal rules of reading tag. You and Michael K. Vaughan will have a lot to answer for. All right. At the end of that video, I will add to this madness and put my prompt, unless somebody else steals it first. And yeah, and I will tag a bunch of people. But at the end of this video, you just get me saying, till next video. Bye for now.